What I've decided to do is to try to use it nearly all the time, showing you examples of behaviour in babies which require a real change of thinking. Now, 50 years ago, it was people were getting over behaviourism, suffering from behaviourism, and there was a few revolutionary things happened, but it had a lot to do with technology. In the 60s, television became available. Film was used, and I was already using film for other research that I was doing with animals, and I got invited by Jerome Bruner to go to Harvard to use it with babies. And I think it's very important in the history of this motor intelligence research how much we've gained by being able to look at slowed down activity of people doing ordinary things, which is exactly the technique that Bernstein used, that Jonathan referred to. He's a founder of prospective control theory in Russia, and on the PDF you can see all these people that I'm mentioning. Now, I got interested in the musicality, polyrhythmic body movement of human beings. We're very weird animals. We walk around the place in this crazy bipedal way, balancing a very heavy body. It's very dangerous, and the reason we do it is it's to free the top half of the body so that we can be extravagant with our talking and gesturing and manipulation of objects and so on. Bird whistle, one of the few references I'm going to mention, he invented kinesics, a science based upon the study of movies, of the timing of movements. And one thing that came out of this research was not only the kind of things that Jonathan mentioned about the temporal patterning of movement, which is highly controlled and which is prospective, that is, it's got to be ahead of time, it's got to be imaginative. The other thing is that there are age-related changes. Jonathan mentioned some that are prenatal, but it's very important that moving is not only something that you do in the moment with control, it's also something that you live with through your life with changes that are coming from within you. So the age-related changes are very important. There's a neonate. There's the age-related changes that we have identified in the first 18 months. And if I go to newborns, we find that they have a great deal of coordination and a great deal of intentionality and rhythmic behaviour. And the fascinating thing about this is that this is the core self that Jonathan was talking about. It's amodal, that is, it works within all the modalities. The internal ones, proprioceptive ones, feeling inside the body, hearing, sight, they all work together. Now, I've got an extraordinary example of this amodal, which I want to show you. This one leaves a problem in our minds which we do not have an adequate explanation for. This baby is totally blind, was born blind, and is permanently blind. The mother is singing a Swedish baby song, and the baby is conducting it with her left hand. The two baby songs that the baby conducts, one is about a squirrel, and the other one is about a little boy that went into the woods and was feeding blueberries to bear. These are famous all over Scandinavia, not just in Sweden, and they're beautiful songs. They are stories in song about children and about squirrels. This is the baby. We plotted the movements of the baby's index finger while the mother was singing, and I'll play now. It's not a very good recording, it's a bit rough, but I think you watch the baby's left hand. Don't pay attention to the right hand. It's doing something different, which is interesting, but a bit confusing. That's the end of the squirrel song, and the baby closes it. Then the mother starts more still. Oh, the baby laughs because the baby recognises the song. This is the first verse. That's the end of the first verse. Now watch the second verse. Well, I showed that to the professor of music, Nigel Osborne, and I said to him, is that baby moving to the song? He said, the baby is conducting like a professional conductor, using the proper movements for a musical phrase, going up for the pitch and closing like that. Those are the standard gestures of a conductor. And he said, expertly and with some anticipation. So we measured very carefully. We found that the baby was moving. This is in the squirrel song, the second verse, the baby is making hand movements, which are very complex but perfectly related to the song. We did some measurements. Now, in the squirrel song, to talk about that first, one of the important discovery we made was that each line or part of the song is a little story in itself. And the length of the lines of the songs, as sung by the mother, show and as moved by the baby, show an extending. The song, each line has a little slowing, and then another one that's slowing. And the singing, the mother's singing is quite slow. It's around largo, between adagio and largo. By the way, all these terms are totally appropriate for baby body movements, the standard musical terms. They use the same sense of time. Now, talking about Nigel Osborne's comment, we measured the tip of the baby's index finger in relation to the pitch of the mother's voice, and where those red vertical bars are, the baby is 1/3 of a second ahead of the mother on those moments. On the red arrows, the baby is precisely coincident with the mother. Now, this is exactly what happens in jazz improvisation between two jazz musicians. One leads a little bit and then they clinch it and so on. It's not mistakes. These are ways of negotiating who is getting the idea to whom. And the 1/3 of a second is a very critical time in human communication. This is the Mors Lula Ola song, showing how not only do the lengths of the lines change with the position in the story, but what's really interesting is that the slowing that we saw within the lines of the other song applies to the end of the whole song as well. So what we've got is the baby is participating in a very precisely regulated, incredibly precisely regulated temporal pattern, which has is a melody, which has, now I should tell you that if I don't have time later, in another example, phoneticians talk about final lengthening. That means this last syllable of a sentence is usually longer than the other syllables. The last syllable of a sentence is longer than the other syllables, slower. It's called final lengthening. This we see in newborn babies' vocal interactions with their parents, that when they have a vocal exchange, which is rather like a little sentence, the last interval between the sounds is longer. There's the Swedish song, by the way. The baby tends to vocalize with the rhyming vowels, and you can see that the second and fourth, the first and second line rhyme, the third and fourth line rhyme, and throughout the song, all these vowels are different. Swedish has twice as many vowels as English. This song has 8 different vowels in it, which are rhyming, and these are things that babies pick up. This is an aspect which is different from timing. This is matching emotion and emotional colour. Now, the new Barry Brazelton is the paediatrician that revolutionised paediatrics by showing parents of a newborn baby within minutes of birth that the baby was a person, and that paediatricians should work with the baby instead of on the baby. And this is a newborn baby that's 20 minutes old, tracking a red ball and it's tracking it with its head, its eyes, its mouth, its 2 hands and 1 foot. The reason it's tracking it is that the mother is playing a game with the baby, teasing the baby gently. The ball is fascinating for the baby, and it's beautifully coordinated. Le Boyer showed that newborn babies in a warm bath, like the baby that Jonathan showed, show beautifully coordinated and expressive movements with their whole body. And there's the diagram that we've used, and Jonathan's already shown you. I wanted to introduce you to the term of synrhythmia, synrhythmic regulation. All our behaviour within ourselves is rhythmic, periodically planned in story-like lines, and we have synrhythmia with other people from birth. That is the ability to share a rhythmic prospect. Here's a newborn baby that was actually born 3 months premature. The mother, it was an intensive care unit which was practicing kangarooing, that is putting the baby inside the mother's dress, ventroventral contact between the naked baby and the naked mother's chest. This is very beneficial for a very premature baby. From a medical point of view, the baby's development and that is better. The mother had to have an operation, a gallbladder operation, which was postponed until after the baby was born. She started kangarooing, but then after a couple of weeks, the father took over, and he was brilliant. He came every day and he kangarooed Nasira. Here she is, 2 months premature, a month later, and I want you to just go through this video and pick up the message.
Nasira's mother is still too weak after the operation to come and visit, but father comes every day and kangaroos with Nasira. Here she is 3 weeks older and already has plump cheeks.
She smiles.
She is under her father's t-shirt and can already converse well with him.
Well, I'll just show you, we've done a spectrographic analysis of this. The red asterisk is the baby, and the black exclamation mark is the father. He imitates the baby's sounds very well. The main formant, that is the pitch, is a bit above middle C, which is a kind of horizon for most vocal exchanges with babies and other people. Now, this is the fast exchange, and I'll show you in a moment. After the fast exchange, the father vocalizes, then the baby vocalizes, and he replies. But at this point, the father lost his attention. He was paying attention to something else, the baby's clothes or something. And at 4-second intervals, the baby called him. First she called weakly, then she shouted at him, then she called again, and he replied. The 4-second interval is an average duration of a phrase in speaking. The fast exchange shows final lengthening. The interaction between them is adagio, as andante. 0.7 of a second is andante, which is a comfortable, going along. And they agree. That means that the father the baby makes a sound which already indicates that it's coming to the end of the sentence, and the father makes a slightly longer pause. So they collaborate by producing a standard set of syllables. This is a study that Jonathan did, where he recorded the arm movements of baby when he was talking to the baby. This is a newborn baby, and he said, "I'll give you one if it's okay," and the baby went like this, "I'll give you one if it's okay," and synchronized perfectly. That was already shown by Lou Sander, that newborn babies, not rarely but commonly, synchronize these spontaneous hand movements with the syllables of adult speech. Now, the whole of this is this mysterious capacity of sharing mimesis, sharing expressive behavior, and neonatal imitation. This happens to be another professor, the present head of music in Edinburgh is Ray MacDonald, and this is his daughter when his daughter was 6 hours old, and he was thrilled. He said she looked like a conductor. What she really looks like is a French chef that's made a perfect sauce. She's going "Nyeh," like that, with a synchronous movement of delight with her fingers, her eyes, and her mouth. This is newborn babies imitating. Vasu Reddy's baby is imitating mouth open and tongue protrusion. This is Emishi Naj. I'm going quickly through these. I want to show you a couple of things of Emishi's which are astonishing. When she was in her early 20s, she had 2 doctorates, one in medicine and one in psychology. She was working in a neonatal unit and she was interested in neonatal imitation, which was then very controversial, in fact denied dogmatically by a lot of learning theorists. Now, she put a band around the baby's chest to measure heartbeat. She stuck up an index finger. The baby imitated, extending an index finger. She held up 2 fingers. Baby imitated. She did something no one had ever thought of doing before. She treated the baby with politeness. After the baby had imitated, she waited quietly, and the baby stared at her, and then the baby repeated the movement to get her to imitate, and she called it provocation. And she found that the heart accelerates just before a provocation, because it takes a big effort for the baby to do something it's never done before. When the baby provocates, the heart starts to decelerate before the baby makes the movement, because the baby is paying attention to the other person. And when you pay attention, your heart slows down. So she proved not only is it a dialogue that the baby is looking for, the baby is not trying to get some silly act like poking of a tongue out. The baby is trying to have an exchange of what you did in an expressive way. In other words, trying to say, okay, I would do that. And it's the dialogue that's important. Now, this is 15 seconds of a dialogue with a baby less than 2 days old. First of all, the baby's watching her own hand. I'm going through more or less at the speed it happened. Then she holds up her index finger. The baby thinks, then says, okay, I'll try it. And she looks at her own finger extending, and the heart accelerates. Then she stops and looks back at Emishi. And then Emishi repeats this, and she says, you're very kind. That's about how fast it was. Now, this is mysterious. Babies imitate from birth. Don't listen to any crap that's coming out in the literature now that it's all an artifact. It's not. It's common. If they want to, which is very important, and in order to have a relationship, not to satisfy some experimental psychologist's publishing ambition. This is another example, Yanis Kugamitsaki's. And what's interesting about this is the baby looks at his mouth, and then he keeps opening his mouth, and the baby watches him, and the right hand of the baby moves up. Then the neonate imitates him synchronously, watching his mouth, and the right hand closes. But then the infant imitates again, looking up at the researcher's eyes. The right hand moves down, then the infant is still looking at his eyes, and then finally the infant makes a third large imitation, looking at the researcher's mouth. This looking between the mouth and the eyes is very important. The baby's trying to get into a reciprocal relationship between what the person is offering and their interest in what the baby is doing. And we're doing that all the time in a conversation. The whole time whenever we have a conversation, we're monitoring each other's behaviour. By the way, we are the only primates with white scleras. That gives us the possibility. I could see you were not looking at me then. You were looking up. I can see whether you're looking at my eyes or my ear. It's quite important for my judgment of whether you're listening to me or not. This is something, there are 2 theories. One theory is that humans evolved this to share thoughts. The other one is that the monkeys don't have a white sclera to hide their thoughts. But I think it's more likely the first. I want to show this because I'm in Scotland.
Wee Wally Winky runs through the toon, upstairs and downstairs in his neckgoon, keeking at the windy, turling at the lock. Our other babies in their bed, it's past 10 o'clock. Wee willie winkie, are you coming, Ben? The cat's singing grey thrums to the sleeping hen. The dog speltered on the flare and disna gie a cheep. But here's a wagrif laddie that winna fall asleep.
Well, I always check these things with musicians, and I asked Nigel Osborne, is it an illusion, or does it seem that those dots are moving to the music? He said it's the same thing. Whatever it is the same thing. It happens to be a newborn baby that is hungry, and the red dot is the left arm, and the green one is the right arm. Its mother is trying to comfort it, and the baby is distressed.
See if you start to get annoyed with Mum.
He does, huh?
Yeah.
So the left arm is the one with the red dot.
It's just because they're starting to get hungry a bit now. Oh, what a mover. You're starting to get annoyed now with Mum. That's what's wrong.
Oh, don't cry.
We're getting hungry. Is that what's wrong, darling? Oh dear. Oh dear.
Now watch. See the change.
We are getting hungry.
So this is a story about a little boy, a Scottish story about a little boy that wouldn't go to sleep, and this is a story about a baby in Scotland who was hungry, and it's the same thing. Now, I'm going to jump to my final examples, and then you just have to go and look at the 250 slides in the PDF. And the last section, which I haven't got time to give you, is on philosophers. I might be able to skim through it, but I've made a selection of people who have grasped this idea that the essence of human consciousness is what we intend to do. It's an old idea, not a new idea. Darwin had that idea, and Charles Sherrington, who invented modern physiology, said that the whole of development is an act of imagination, not an act of memory. You're not remembering anything you've never done. You're imagining doing it. And it's this imaginative creation that is critical. Now, when we started work on this in 1967, in Centre for Cognitive Studies of Jerome Bruner, with Barry Brazelton and Martin Richards from Cambridge, we set up a comfortable room and recorded mothers and babies in such a way that we could see, using film, what the mother was doing on a mirror. We put a mirror beside the baby so we could see what the mother was doing. The first discovery is shown here. The mother was imitating the baby, not the other way around. The mother is following everything the baby is doing with an attitude that is matching the baby's active behaviour. Now, babies around 5 or 6 weeks become very interested in other people's activity with their eyes. Their visual system can't develop in utero. There's no opportunity for the study of objects and spatial arrangements and things before you're born. Unless the mother goes out on the beach in a bikini, it's very dark inside. But there's not much. Occasionally a shadow will go by and the baby might track it, but it can't learn very much. But after birth there's a very rapid development of visual ability. And Mary Catherine Bates have discovered that with this development, the baby becomes a very skilled conversational partner, and she called it proto-conversation. And she said it was characterized by a sort of delighted, ritualized courtesy and more or less sustained attention and mutual gaze. This covers everything. Strong interpersonal involvement, joy, ritual, that means patterns which are artificial and which can be remembered and repeated, and a great deal of interest in it. And this is a 6-week-old showing her different expressions. She's beginning to be interested in objects and will reach for them with more skill. Now, it's interesting here she's making a pointing movement with her right index finger. It's very interesting that that baby was conducting with the left hand, which relates to the right hemisphere of the brain, which is more emotional. The left hemisphere of the brain is very interested in vocabulary and specification. So pointing movements, nearly always babies make pointing movements with their right hand more than with their left, even if they're going to become a left-hander. We can't go into that, it's a long story. This little baby came to Edinburgh University when she was 6 weeks old, and she shared a proto-conversation with her mother. This now is 27 seconds. It's very famous.
Come on, again. Come on then. That's clever. Oh yes, is that right? Well, tell me some more then. Tell me some more then. Oh, come on. Goo. Goo.
Okay, there she's using her right hand. This was analysed by Stephen Mallock, a very skilled musician. He's a conductor, violinist, and also an expert on musical acoustics. And we collaborated looking at the communicative musicality of the communication. This is a pitch plot of that dialogue. And the baby makes these utterances here, the ones that are in boxes. They're all oscillating around middle C, C4 here. That's middle C of the piano, and of the baby, and of the mother. Now, I'll play it through again. Notice that he has classified this as a story with an introduction, a development, a climax, and a resolution. Those are terms used by literary scholars to analyse a narrative. Now,
Come on, again. Come on then. That's clever. Oh yes, is that right? Well, tell me some more.
oops, sorry. Oh dear. I'll try to play it and then.
Come on, again. Come on then. That's clever.
Oh, damn, I won't touch it. I'll keep away from it. And then maybe we'll see it. You'll just have to
Come
track it.
on, again. Come on then. That's clever. Oh yes, is that right?
That's the development.
Well, tell me some more then.
The climax they
Tell me
synchronise.
more then. No. Come on. Goo.
One very interesting thing is that this second vocalization of the baby here already is going, it's drifting down. And then the mother closes by saying, agu, agu. Now, he's reclassified those phases recently. He's called the end of the climax, he's called that the resolution, and he's called this a coda. Now that's very important in music because a coda is a celebration or a recollection of something that has gone well or is interesting. It's a reflection. So this baby is joining in a reflective assessment of what happened. The other thing that's very important is that the introduction and development, and to some extent the climax, are verbal. The final resolution and coda are non-verbal. They've turned into sound only. So the words are not necessary. These are plots. One of the things that's very important is that stressed consonants are separated by 1.5 seconds. These are what Stephen called bars. Standard bars in music is about 1.5 seconds, which is what these are. And this is one bar that was left vacant by the mother, which is perfectly filled by the baby, with precise. This is just like the same dimensions as jazz improvisation between two skilled musicians. Now, I'll have to stop now. Stephen has produced a theory and described the parameters as pulse, quality, and narrative. Narrative is very important, and there's a story here, 30 years story. I managed to get hold of the father, who was in Vancouver, and sent him an email and said, we've just produced a book on the recording from Laura speaking to her mother that was done 30 years ago. Are you Prosser, the husband of Kay Prosser and the father of Louise and Laura? And he said, indeed I am, and here are my girls. And he sent me this picture. Now, he later sent me a video of Laura talking to her baby, And she said, agu. So I said, you've learned nothing in 30 years, because that's what you said to your mother. There's the book that we produced, and it has 27 chapters by experts in brain science, music, cultural learning, infant development and language. Everybody agreed that this particular sample has an extremely rich series of facts in it which help us understand something about the process of sharing intentionality and affect appraisal. Now, I have to stop now. I have the latter part of the presentation is about storytelling. Have I got time to play this? This is a 10-week-old lecturing her mother. She does all the talking. All that happens is the mother's nose moves up and down, and the mother occasionally goes, oh, like that. She does the baby noises. The baby is lecturing with her whole face and voice. Da. And she says, da. She shouts. And then she says, did you get it? Now, we've done an analysis of that. It's got the pulse that we now know is universal. There's three phrases with different degrees of intensity. It's very interesting that at the end, she comes to, lowers her pitch and looks very seriously at the mother. And it does look as though she's saying, did you get it? And then what's really interesting, this last utterance of the first phrase, the baby does something she shouldn't do at 10 weeks. She makes a consonant. She says, da, 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 with her tongue. At the end, the mother makes a vocalization. She says, da. She learnt from the baby. So that's that example. Now, I do want to mention, because of your interest in emotions, that we are very concerned with pride and shame. Baby songs are stories, round and round the, they've got a structure. They've got the same structure. We study about 12 different languages from many different places. And this basic structure of 4-line stanzas and so on, with rhyming vowels, those are universal. Here's a baby doing round and round the garden like, mother's doing round and round the garden like a teddy bear, and the baby is fascinated with it, and she vocalizes with the last vowel. The mother says teddy bear, and the baby goes air, to match the vowel. There's clapper handies. Babies love hand clapping. Here's a baby that's very fond of a left-handed baby clapping left hand over right while her mother claps vertically to show her clapper handies. She's at home and she's sitting on her father's knee, and it happened they're being photographed, and the mother is standing by the photographer and she says, clap handies. So the baby does this very, very proud demonstration of clap handies. The father is also proud. He wins darts at the pub. He's also proud when he's looking at the baby. We're very interested in pride. The Queen was terribly proud on her Jubilee, and it's the same expression as the baby, except she's got purple lipstick and teeth. That's pride. What's very interesting is that at the same age, in front of a very nice stranger, she doesn't want to look at him. She then shows him clap her hands because she's very brave. He doesn't get it. He says, aren't you going to say something to me? And she can tell from the tone of voice he didn't get it. So she puts her hand on her head. Are you crazy? I showed you what I'm famous for. And then she won't speak to him. She does it to herself. Now, she's a very brave little girl. Shame doesn't look like that's as she is in front of a lady. These are babies, older babies showing shame with strangers. A horrible expression. Teasing and joking is going on at this time. And then at 1 year, they start to get interested in sharing a task. Now, all of this will be in the PDF, and you can read it, with the references. This little baby is being asked to put the wooden dolls in the truck. The mother is not showing her what to do. The mother is simply pointing and saying, put the doll in the truck. And the baby takes the doll from her, puts it in the truck, and looks up with a look of smug satisfaction. Now, this is the function of pride, is to be able to do what you intend to do with your body and its body movements in such a way that other people appreciate and regard as clever. She also reversed the game and insisted on the mother to put the doll in the truck. The mother keeps repeatedly pointing to the trucks, saying, "You put that in the truck." And the baby goes. Then she's also a clown. The mother's pretending to be sad. The baby thinks it's riotous. Now, these are moral aspects of the communication which I have to leave you to think about later.